Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be going over every Senate race that is most likely to flip either to the Democrats or Republicans in the upcoming 2026 Senate midterms. But before we get started, make sure you guys are subscribed, click the bell so you don't miss out on my content. Press the like button, share this video. Don't forget we have memberships if you're interested. You can find links to that in the description section down below. So let's begin with the Republicans most likely Senate races or seats to flip in the 2026 Senate midterms, because I only think there's one that they're most likely to flip. Majority is to the Democrats, obviously, because it's a blue wave year. That's obvious. So I think Michigan is the only Senate race in the 2026 midterms that Republicans can possibly flip. That's most likely to flip. It's between Mike Rogers, who ran in 2024, lost to Alyssa Slotkin by just 0.3%, very close. He could have won. In a more favorable year towards the Republicans. Now it's the opposite. It's a favorable year for Democrats. He's going up against potentially Abdul El Said, or Mallory McMahon, or Haley Stevens. We're not too sure. As of right now, it's very close. There's no clear winner at all. It's very tight. But it looks like that it's leaning towards slightly to Abdul El Said becoming the Democratic nominee, which gives Mike Rogers the best odds to win. So I do think Michigan would probably be the only most likely Senate race to flip to the GOP in the 2026 midterms. I do think that the Democrats will probably have about 4 of these states in this video. Let's start off with the most likely one to flip to the Democrats, which is clearly North Carolina. Roy Cooper is more than likely going to defeat Mike Whatley, his Republican challenger, I believe, who was the former chairman of the Republican Party, something like that. I do think Roy Cooper wins by a margin of about 6 percentage points. That's likely. I do think that's in line with the majority of polls. I don't think Michael Whatley is the worst candidate. Neither do I think he is the best. I think he's just below average. Roy Cooper is the former governor of this state. Very popular statewide in the state of North Carolina, so he's going to win by a likely amount. That is the most likely to flip. In fact, that is most likely, more than likely, going to flip to the Democrats. Next in line that is most likely to flip, other than North Carolina, I would say next up is probably Alaska. That's another one that's more likely to flip to the Democrats. I do think that Mary Petola is a very popular Democrat in the state of Alaska, going up against an incumbent Republican in Dan Sullivan, who used to be popular. He used to, keyword used to, not anymore. His approval rating has sunk, below 40% to the high 30s, like 39, somewhere around there. And if this was a few years ago, you would expect Dan Sullivan would win by a comfortable amount, but well, not anymore. Mary Petola is very good in Alaska. I think she can win a lot of the Native American support, and she's going to win, in my opinion, by about 5 percentage points. That's slightly enough to consider it a likely amount. I would say somewhere between lean to likely. I would say likely, just because in the last 7 or 8 polls, she just keeps on winning by about the same margin. So it's consistent. The polls are not over the place in Alaska like they are in the rest of the nation. So I think Alaska is very clear, and Mary Petola wins by probably about 5 percentage points. The next in line for the Senate race most likely to flip to the Democratic Party in the 2026 midterms, I would say, is probably Texas. I would consider that's third in line between North Carolina, Alaska, and then in third most likely to flip, the third most state is Texas. You have Ken Paxton going up against James Talarico, who James Talarico is clearly better than Ken Paxton by any means. Now, him being better alone does not necessarily mean he's going to win, because Texas is a very red state. It voted for Trump by double digits, about 14 percentage points in the last presidential election in 2024. It's going to be very hard for him to win. Not only does he have to win the Democratic base, which he is going to, but there's a lot of Jasmine Crockett voters and supporters that refuse to support James Talarico, and I think that might come to bite him at the very end. Majority of polls has him actually winning by a very comfortable amount. I've seen some polls have him up by 8. Most recent ones has it a tie, or he's up by 1 percentage point. The polls are all over the place in the state of Texas. I do not trust them whatsoever. I do think that if Talarico does win, he wins it by about a percentage point. Now, I do have Ken Paxton currently up by just 1 point as of right now. So less than Ted Cruz's margin in 2018. So I do think that James Tallarico will perform better than Beto O'Rourke did in 2018. I only have Paxton winning by 1. Very small amount. I think whoever wins this race won't win it by more than 2 at the very most, in my opinion. Ken Paxton, a flawed candidate, obviously. I believe he was prosecuted or something like that for trying to interfere with the 2020 election as Attorney General for Donald Trump. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I am right. So that is in third line to flip. I also do think that Maine is probably in fourth of one of the likely states to flip to Democrats. But out of these 4, North Carolina, Texas, Alaska, and Maine, I would say Maine is probably the least out of them. So I'll characterize it as the least one, just because Plattner has a lot of scandals when it comes to the Nazi tattoo and all of that stuff. But I do think that he was poised to win a few months ago, and I actually did have him defeating Susan Collins, just because basically people in Maine want a different direction. But because of these scandals, I do think that does move the needle for Susan Collins just a little bit. Now his own internal poll, the most recent internal poll for Plattner, has him up by only 4, and that's an internal poll for Plattner, and that's bad. His internal poll should have him up by close to 10 percentage points, realistically, if he's going to win. Because Sarah Gideon in 2020, I believe, was up by close to 9, sometimes even double digits. And she ended up losing by a staggering 8 percentage points in a blue wave year. And that was a presidential election. This is a midterm, so you can argue it benefits Susan Collins. I'm not saying I support her whatsoever. I just believe that she is going to win. Now, me saying she wins does not mean I support her. I just think that's the case. That's the unfortunate reality for Plattner. His scandals will come to haunt him at the end of the day, which is why I say it is the least likely out of the 4 to flip, but it is still considered one of the most likely states at the same time to flip to the Democrats. So this is the video. Let me know what you agree with or disagree with in the comment section down below. One last final reminder is to subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss all my content, and press the like button. Share this video, and don't forget we have memberships if you're interested. You can find links to that in the description section. I will probably do the same thing, but for the governor's race.